Kryon's message. Greetings, dear ones, I am Kryon of Magnetic Service. What follows is new information about something very complex. This will be seen as controversial, as always, and the controversy comes from those who have learned all about certain spiritual attributes and who have held this information as the way it works for years and years. One of the hardest things that any human being can do is to get out of the box of information that they were born into. The box is the description of the belief in a paradigm that makes sense to the individual, because that's how the individual was trained and taught. If you were taught something all your life, then it becomes true. This box of belief also makes sense to you because many times it has been taught to you by loved ones or teachers you have respected and loved. It makes sense because as you learn certain things, including those things that were spiritual and metaphysical, you have accepted the premises and cemented them into your truth. Now suddenly, I come along and give you a whole different perspective. Even before I give you this, I tell you that it's a new perspective for you because the energy of this planet is starting to support the evolvement of understanding. If you believed certain things about nature, and then along comes a microscope that shows you a completely different paradigm, you must get out of the old box of belief. This is an example of what's happening with this message. Multidimensional things, dear ones, that are completely and totally beyond the dimension you live in, seem odd and strange to you. You can't understand multidimensional life that might exist in ways that do not conform to your definition of life, because all you have is a 3D biology. Changing paradigms require rethinking. How do you feel about light? Does light have life? You will say, well, no. It doesn't meet the current requirements. It doesn't seem to reproduce or sustain itself through certain processes, and you tick off the list of things that do not meet your learned definition of life. Then you learn something in the lab, in a non-life science venue. Light seems to have a choice. It changes if a human being is around. Light changes form if you observe it. That is almost a cause and effect relationship to human consciousness. So, where are you going to go with that, since it starts to bring up other questions? What's alive? What's not alive? If something can sense your consciousness and actually decide something because of it, it is alive? What is your definition of life? I give you that only because what comes next is extremely complex and breaks other paradigms of belief. Again, we open the door to a discussion that is beautiful about the human soul. The human soul is not anything like what you have been told. Even if you follow the Kryon messages, you are receiving only surface information, a summary about the complexity, beauty, and the magnificence of your soul. Humans use the soul word so simply. On a ship, you report how many souls are on board. It's a reference to how many human beings because that's how you see it. Then you turn to spiritual teaching and you ask, what is a soul? The answers you hear will contain many descriptions, but most of them are linear, one soul, one human. Dear ones, you have a soul and it is with you for life. However, know this. That soul of yours existed before you came to this planet and you come into the world with it, live with it, then you leave this earth and the soul goes on to the other side of the veil. The soul, like God, is eternal. It is part of the spiritual system of everything. So, has it occurred to you that the soul might be the real you? The human part is temporary and the soul is permanent. Even so, many still believe that it only comes to the planet one time. Many will tell you that the soul is just here for a while and goes away and it never comes back. There are many differences and ideas. Most intuitive ideas about the soul. Let's take a look at the original intuitive information on the planet about the human soul, before it got watered down with generations of rules and variations around it. The original spiritual systems of this planet, the very original ones, saw the soul as a reincarnating entity that keeps coming back. Those systems also saw the energy of what you would call karma today. Karma was defined as the expression of the energies of human lifetimes from your own past lives, which have energies carried into your present lifetime. almost a third of the planet still believes this way. More than 2 billion people on this planet believe in reincarnation as a way of life. These concepts are the most intuitive ones you can find on this planet, and quite often early intuition represents the core truth. The complexity. Today in modern spiritual society, the soul often becomes very linear and simple information, almost like it has devolved into an odd children's version. It states that, indeed, you have a soul from God. While it's here on earth with you, it has somehow been tainted by past humanism, dirty when you got here. Then when you die, it gets punished for eternity if you don't believe the correct things. Can you see how this differs greatly from first intuitive belief? The perception of God has morphed from all-loving creator to human-like father and judge, not to mention the creation of a torturing devil to punish souls. The truth is more complex. For those who follow metaphysical teachings, the answer to the question of, what happens when you die, has become more and more complex. I have sat in front of you many times and I have given you information about soul splitting. I've asked you to even examine the question, what is your higher self? Is it a higher portion of your soul or a higher vibrating portion of you? Where is it? Then I tell you there is no such thing as the term, where, when it comes to multidimensionality. Location itself is a linear idea, and if I tell you that the soul is everywhere all the time in all parts of the galaxy, and this is very confusing to you, then you ask, then where am I? The answer is yes. Your soul is attached to part of the creative source, which is multidimensional and is everywhere all the time. To many, this means your soul is a part of God. It's not local and exists everywhere. It doesn't simply come in with you, either. Dear ones, your soul is also still out there in the universe, even as you walk around here. That's hard to grasp, isn't it? Wait a minute, Kryon, you mean my soul is not completely in my body? Correct. How could you have a higher self, soul, and have all of it be in your body? Part of your higher self must also be somewhere else, for it contains way too much energy for a human body to hold. So, if that's true, then your soul is really in at least 2 parts. Then you start to realize that this is an element of soul splitting. Now, that word splitting is wrong because even splitting is an absolute linear concept. You have one thing and out comes the knife, and you have 2. That's splitting. That is not the way of it. However, it's the only concept I can use. You don't have a word that is an amalgamation or a confluence of sharing. One soul could also be part of a million. This is simply not in your understanding. It just isn't there. So, what comes next is even more difficult. All of this I have given is to introduce you to the complexity of what many have called the walk-in. The walk-in. In the channeling that we gave a moment ago in the seminar, we sat next to the teacher Marilyn Harper. When she channels, dear ones, she closes her eyes and then opens them, and she is someone else. This paradigm of existence for her took place after an experience that she had called the walk-in. Her experience has been well documented in her life, and how she describes it conforms to what metaphysics describes as the way a walk-in works. Let's talk about a walk-in and how it's supposed to work in its basic form. Here is the perception. You're minding your own business with your own soul, and then because of something unusual, which we will describe soon, another soul walks into your life. The result is that you become so different that you don't even recognize who you were before. It is so startlingly different, as was the case with Marilyn the teacher, that even her son asked the question, "What have you done with my mother?" That is how profound the shift and the change is, and to a human being there is only one answer: you shifted souls, the walk-in experience. So the perception is that the soul you were born with goes away somehow, or stays in the back seat somehow, and another soul comes in, somehow. Again, it's called a walk-in. So, before we discuss any more of the reality of what might actually be taking place, I want to talk about when this attribute of the walk-in happens the most. The causality of the walk-in. It's a beautiful story, and there are those in this room who have experienced it. It is common for humans to experience an emergency situation, whether it's an accident, a hospital trip, or something at home where an event happens called a near-death experience. Even that term is mislabeled. Your definition of death is very linear, and scientifically many have died several times on the operating table. This event is what metaphysicians have termed an NDE, or near-death experience. So we'll call these occurrences the same thing, NDEs. If you talk to someone who has had an NDE, there are varying stories. Interestingly enough, they are not always positive. It has to do with the consciousness of the one who has had the experience. But in this case, let us talk about those of high consciousness who have had the experience and have come out changed. The NDE experience and the brain. What happens during a near-death experience? First of all, the idea that you died is preposterous. You only died clinically. You'd know if you were dead. But to you and your consciousness, death is close. When there is even a beginning inkling of a shutdown of systems that are vital for life, when you stop breathing, when your heart stops, when the systems that are supposed to function from oxygenation don't have oxygen, these all send a signal to the brain, death is coming. The brain does something you have never realized then. The brain actually runs a program for this. When the brain starts to realize that death is imminent, there is something beautiful that happens. It's a safety valve. It's a consciousness of benevolence that comes over you to protect you from what you've been told is the horror of death. It starts giving you some wonderful feelings of benevolence and light that you'll never forget. It's common to almost all of those who experience positive NDEs. It's also common for those who you might have seen who actually pass over. They don't go screaming in horror. They go peacefully and often with a smile. This is a gift within the chemistry of consciousness, to allow every human being the opportunity to go from one life to another in peace. For the NDE, those who experience this program will often see themselves in a tunnel, and perhaps they will see an amazing light and feel the perfect love of God, and they are not afraid. Am I telling you that this is not accurate? No. This is the program, and I'm telling you that this is very accurate. Your brain is programmed for the truth, and in those times where death seems to be imminent or could be imminent, the body doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know whether it's dying or not. But it starts to run the program of benevolent love to let you feel the truth of it. It starts to show you the other side. The truth is that you, your consciousness, will continue. Death is coming, but it's beautiful. There is no shutdown, dear ones. There is no horror story. There is no evil apparition with a sickle coming at you. Instead, there is another loving and beautiful reality coming, and it's going to be okay. Listen, this is a core truth that is hardwired to your cells and your heart and your brain. Your pineal is awakening, and everything is all working together to show it to you so that you won't be afraid. That's the love of God. It's a death program, but what often happens, dear ones, is that you survive and come out of that experience changed forever. Because this death program started to run, yet you didn't die, you experienced a glimpse of a core spiritual truth. Then you come out of the NDE experience and suddenly everything seems different in your life. Oh boy, is it different. For some of you it is so different that what you have done, get ready, is to enhance your soul's experience to the next level of evolvement. You realize, don't you, that your soul is in 3D right now. An enhanced soul is one that is not in 3D. It's one that has had an NDE experience. It goes beyond anything you might ever have experienced so far in your life, and you become so changed that you seem like another person. Sometimes you are affected so much and go so beyond who you were before that some may ask what happened to the other person. Do you see what I'm saying? The one is many. Did you receive the soul specifically of another human being? The answer is no. That's controversial, isn't it? But why does it seem that you did? Okay, now think out of the box. Let's really identify what's in your soul. Does your soul include potentially those family or those you've met in past lives who have melded with your soul? The answer is yes. Your soul is not your own, dear ones. It has family in it. Does your soul have only one consciousness in it of you right now, or does it also have a consciousness in it of who you also used to be on earth? See what I mean? How many personalities are there? I've said this before. You are linear. You want to look in the mirror and say, one human, one soul. One reflection in face, one soul. I own my own soul and nobody is in there but me. But what about all the helpers and the guides that come with you? Where do you think they live? On the ceiling? Where are the energies of who you used to be in your past lives? They live inside you. The entourage that we speak of is yours. It's inside you. It comes with the soul. You just happen to be in charge of that beautiful, unexplainable, multidimensional thing you call the Merkaba, not knowing that it contains pieces and parts of you and your helpers and family. You all sing the song in light that we've talked about. Now that's complex. Your Merkaba is the vehicle that your soul is packaged within, and it's also not all here. Now that's even more complex. There is a lot there. Back to the walk-in. Do you know where else you might see this attribute of the walk-in? It's within advanced souls who have a huge awakening that yanks them out of an old energy and puts them to something that is brand new and multidimensional, and that looks completely and totally different. You see it every day in the religions around you where somebody has an awakening to the love of God. It doesn't matter what the religion is, for love is love. We have told you this before. It doesn't matter what the belief system is, for there often comes a time where a human being has wallowed in old energy for years, and then has a massive consciousness shift. Perhaps there is a healing, or the love of God is revealed by a pastor or a priest or a shaman, and the human is struck with the brand new paradigm of realization that they are included in the love of God. So, if this happens, are they a walk-in? Did you ever interview them? They will say, yesterday I was one person and today I'm another. I would never do what I did before because today I have the love of God. They may quote scripture to you as proof because for them that is absolutely the core truth, love. They feel it in their hearts and they know they're different. That's not a lot different from a walk-in, now is it? What actually is happening? There are really two kinds of this experience and a few shades between. The first kind is where an individual has had self-discovery and starts an evolution of spirituality within. The second kind is when there seem to be no self-discovery, but an NDE or similar experience lets the brain run the death program. But both kinds seem very similar, don't they? In the case of Marilyn, it was a medical operation. An operation will quite often be the catalyst for this. After all, you're taken to a place that is not where you are normally, and often you're sedated. This is a catalytic time, and quite often this is the time where the soul says, "Are you ready for the next step? You're not doing what you came for." And at some level you say, "Oh boy, am I ready? Let's go." Then you come out differently than you went in. But you needed the emergency event to push the decision, or an NDE. Listen, I'm telling you something that you should know, you're not getting another soul. You're getting your own soul, yourself, enhanced. We've told you before that the prophets who walked around in the past, and some who still walk here, were able to change physics and emote spiritual benevolence so much that all you wanted to do was to sit at their feet. Where they walked, flowers grew instantly and the animals would follow them. They could morph physics into food and create miracles of life. This is a soul who is working at a very, very high level. The only difference between them and you is the degree at which the soul is fully activated with the love and power of the creative source, God. Did you hear that? Most of humanity comes in working at about 30%. A master is at 90%. If you go into a hospital at 30%, and come out at 45%, nobody will recognize you. Everything about you will be different. but it's your own soul having evolved. Where do you stand? Where are you in all of this? Up to this point, a walk-in is very special to so many, and I'm going to tell you that there are walk-ins in this room who don't really call themselves that. Can you point to a place where you had an experience of aha? Perhaps you went to sleep one way and woke up another because now you get it. Perhaps it was a time when you allowed yourself to speak in a way that said, "Spirit, I'm ready to go to the next step," and in that you changed forever. Perception and energy of the walk-in. Let me tell you about a spiritual axiom. Any human has free choice, but they cannot go backwards to a lower, unevolved soul level. Premise: you cannot go backwards. If you try, however, using your own free choice, you will be in dysfunction and unbalance. But you cannot then regain or capture an older energy. It only goes one way only, up. The teacher Marilyn speaks about a reunification with her old soul. This is a linear idea, but what happened is very real. What she was able to do was to begin another step in the evolution of her soul. She had the idea and the recognition that she could reunite even with her soul's lower energy and recapture the good things that were there, the memories, the children, the births. This is maturity and balance, being able to look at yourself and forgive and advance. So, it was not a reunification with the old soul before the walk-in experience, as much as it was an advancement of the entire soul to a new, higher level, in order to allow her to teach this to others. She was able to meld her evolved self to the past in a way that was mature, made sense, and was balanced. I don't want this information to be received in a way that would be disappointing. I want you to understand the magnificence of an evolution process of your soul. This is happening more often than you think. Is the man who sits in front of you a walk-in? If you wanted to look at the definition from mainstream metaphysics, you'd say, perhaps, he went from one person to another. Well, it actually took him several years, but he still did. Is that a walk-in? The answer is no. Yet if you look at his former life, it's so different that many who knew him would comment, "At what point in time did you go insane?" That's because he is nothing like the man he was or that they worked next to. Some have said it's because a dark entity got a hold of him and reshaped his life. That was their reality, since this is what they were taught happens. Here is another axiom of spirituality. Those in a lower energy paradigm cannot look up to another higher one and understand it. They must experience it to understand. Therefore, everything more evolved appears stupid or evil to the ones who are not there. Again, can you explain color to a person who only perceives black and white? You sit around with your friends talking about shades of blue and green, and the black and white human will think you are all a bit crazy. You cannot look up upon a more evolved paradigm and perceive it as logical or functional. You will only see a fog of misunderstanding or perhaps insanity from your perception. Dear ones, I want to give you a truth. The soul of the man you see in front of you gradually evolved into what you see now. He is not a walk-in. But what happened to Marilyn happened instantly. That is the big difference for what has happened to many gradually or from an NDE experience. You start to awaken to a grander truth, and then, if you're confident and brave enough, say, "I know there is more. Dear Spirit, I love you. God, I trust you. Show me what I need to know." Then you stand by for validation, because that's exactly what my partner did in a chair 30 years ago. As the engineer, he wanted validation that it actually was true, and he got it in his heart in a way that only he could tell. Old souls of this planet are beginning to awaken to a bigger truth, one that speaks of the magnificence of the plan, how your soul is evolving now on the earth, and what is happening around you. Dear ones, it's the beginning of the evolution of light on this planet. In order for that to happen faster, darkness will reveal itself. It has already started to happen. All of these things, dear ones, represent the beginning of more light and the evolution of human nature. Old souls, your soul is starting to wake up. The walk-in is the result of a fast wake-up for an advanced soul. This does not diminish the experience. It enhances it. Lee turns to Marilyn, who is sitting next to him, as Kryon says the following. You are truly magnificent, dear, and all that you've been through, Marilyn, is also magnificent, and will continue because the evolution of your soul is not finished. Listen carefully, all of you have this. You have the ability to awaken to a grander truth simply by examination and sticking up your hand and saying, Dear God, if it's real, show me. That's a fair request and will be honored. This is the way it works, dear ones, for so many. That's the message that you needed to hear this day. And so it is. Kryon. Channeled by Lee Carroll.